Yeah, one thing in here, the cell service is horrible, if not unworkable.
And if it doesn't work, we'll punt and make it
I have a
work.
great signal.
I get all bars.
All bars.
It's our high school is.
Well, if you do USL, you'd have all bars.
I've got Sprint and it's all bars is what I've got.
Okay, so I'm the only Verizon guy, and I
I
only
got
have
Verizon.
one X service.
Yeah, I got Verizon.
I've got 4G.
Okay, quiet in the back.
Yes, no fighting. I deal with that 5 days a week. So
What do you teach?
8th grade science and social studies and language arts, mainly science, but I teach one class of whatever else they tell me to teach. So
And what school?
Center Point Urbana.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, the kids love using technology, so any chance they can use. We have Chromebooks. The kids have access to Chromebooks in our rooms, and you can go on via a website and vote as well, so there's lots of different options for them. Awesome. So let's get started. So my name is Adam Hildebrandt. Lived in the area for 11 years. Married. My wife teaches nursing at Kirkwood. I have 3 boys, 7 yesterday, 3.5, and 1.5. So very busy. I've taught at Center Point in 8th grade in science for all 11 years that I've taught in a school. So I've been there a while. Our financial journey, when I started teaching, I was, you show up the first day and not married yet and green, and they say, oh, you're a teacher, do you want to coach? And I'm sure, so how about softball? I don't know anything about it. It's just managing bodies. How about volleyball? Don't know anything about it. It's just managing bodies. And for the most part in junior high, they're correct. I was the assistant for that, so I took the lower groups and made it work. And one of my assistants was, we talk on bus rides and things, and she said, oh, have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey? We're going through financial peace, and we're going to teach it. I was like, no, I don't know anything about it. So she's talking to us about it, and it all kind of made sense, and we got to be really good friends with them. And one spring we were like, gosh, we weren't poor by any means, but we were like, where the heck does all of our money go? So she said, just try it. So I sort of went through and self-taught financial peace to myself and read every book that I could find, and we started the journey, and it was quite the amazing, eye-opening journey. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we've done later on, but this all started about 7 years ago. We were debt-free after about 2 years, and then I've been trying to get financial peace into the church and talking about personal finance and stewardship as much as I could. I was on the stewardship committee at St. E's for 2 years. Might have been 3 years, but anyway, a couple years. And I really enjoy this. The nice thing is it's not my job, it's a hobby, so I'm very passionate about it. Some of this stuff, I was asked to talk about finances and stewardship, which is not a lot of guidelines, so I tried to kind of give a broad range of things. And if it doesn't apply to you, maybe it will apply to someone that you can help in the future. So the first thing will be this poll. So if you go on and text Adam Hildebrandt 574 to 37607, a couple seconds later it will tell you you're in. And it will say, anytime you text to a 5-digit number, it will say charges may apply. I don't know your individual services, but it doesn't charge for US Cellular. Once you're in, it'll say you've joined the group or something along those lines, and then you'll be able to text your
Is it
one
case
word for
sensitive?
stewardship. No, it is not. No. I'm going to see, since we have that nice light there, I'm going to see if these are front to back. Perfect. Is that better?
Yes.
Awesome.
So given that I'm on Verizon and mine doesn't work, I'll just give you kind of like 2 what he put. One, and I would say not mine.
Can I just text the numbers instead of typing the letters?
Yep, so you'll text, your 2 will be to 37607, and then you'll text this as the text, and then it will send you a response. And then you should be able to enter, after it sends you the response, then you should be able to,
Oh, so you just put
Enter
the
in words.
5-digit number in first in your recipient.
yep.
Gotcha.
It'll work by the window.
Yeah, it got all the signal, but it doesn't do anything.
Welcome to my world.
Technology is a great equalizer.
It is a great equalizer, that's right. And it's funny, you know,
It's never equal if you're over 30, let me tell you.
well, we're told the kids are so much more into technology, so we try to use it, and we can test it, and it works great, and you show up with the kids, and there's always something that goes wrong, so. If it doesn't work, if you guys are willing to share, we can go around and share too.
So then you get a note back that says,
It should say,
Hildebrandt session.
Yeah.
Messaging would like
When
to
you're done,
send
leave, you reply, leave, so then we're waiting for.
and then you can, once you get that message, you can type in your one word.
Oh, the one word, what was the?
So one word that you think of when you hear stewardship.
You joined, so when you're done, by leave. But so now it's set up. If you get the notice, you joined data.
Yep. So now you can type in your text. You can type any words that you want.
oh, so once you get that, then type in the.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, look at that.
That's cool. So what does it cost for the paid version of Poll Everywhere?
There's two different. There's a education package which is $50 a year, I think, and it gives you a lot of stuff. And then there's like the ultimate business package, which is like $1,000 a year.
Mm.
Like that.
Sit back here. It works by the
So
window.
then we can just put leave in it, right? Because that's what it says.
Yep, you can text leave. Put yours in for you.
Seemed to work by the window for me with the Verizon.
All right, so we can talk about some of these things. We'll come back to these if you're still waiting for your responses. But sharing, discipline, offering, not mine, those are excellent things, and a lot of those we'll talk about a little bit later. A history on stewardship. A steward means one who manages another affairs, and it used to be in the royal lands. The royalty would live in the biggest castle, and the second biggest castle was the chief steward, and the chief steward was responsible for managing all assets, food, money, everything, and he was in charge of taking care of making sure the royals had money, food, and all of the people of the land and everything else. So he was a manager of assets. Christians have kind of taken that word to mean a manager of God's assets, and that's where you see that a lot in churches. Stewardship is managing God's asset. So, fistful of dollars. How many of you recognize that picture? How many of you have ever seen Fistful of Dollars? I wasn't sure how many would, but this was a great analogy to mine, and it kind of goes with the not mine response. Talking about if you hold on to your money with a closed fist, none of it will leave, and it's very secure. But also none can come back in. Okay, and when you have an open fist, some goes out, but some can come back in. And that's really what God wants you to do. Owners versus managers. Who really does own everything we have? It's not ours. It was given to us by God, and we are responsible for managing it. And He is the giver of all. Managing God's money. So one of the things when we started our journey, one of the most difficult parts was figuring out where does our money go. And Zig Ziglar has a great quote, and we've tried to kind of live by that. He says, ready, fire, aim, and that's the response from most people. Okay, they get ready, they spend their money, and then they wonder where it went. And he said, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. This is a quick little preview. It talks a lot about how we feel about money and spending money.
Nothing immoral, nothing illegal or anything like that. I didn't steal from it, I sold to another bank, and then word got out on the street that they scared out of my mind. I didn't know what to do. I remember standing with that shower so hot in my face that I could just barely stand there, and I would just stand there and cry because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any steps. No one talked about this stuff much. And then I started slowly discovering that the Bible had some things to say about money. I started reading a man named Larry Burkett, and then I started reading another guy named Ron Blue. Met another man named Howard Dayton, and these men had been teaching biblical finance throughout North America, and I started learning from them and started applying those principles in our lives because we were so beat up we didn't know what to do. And see, I had all these letters and licenses after my name that says I'm supposed to know something about money. I've got a finance degree, and there I sat broke. Apparently something was wrong with my plan, and I needed a new one. You see, I do everything backwards. Most people meet God at the bottom. I met him on the way up. I just got to know him on the way down. What we're talking about here is that we found the truth. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Everybody stand up for a second. Here's what I want you to do. I want first, understand that I can see all of you and I will mess with you if you don't play my games. What I want you to do is I want everyone in here to close your eyes. Thank you. Okay, now, here's what I want you to do. With your eyes closed, even if you don't know the answer, it's okay to be wrong. It's just not okay to not play. You got to play. So even if you don't know the answer, you got to guess. I want you to point north. Keep your eyes closed and point north. Now stick with your plan. Stick with your feeling. Open your eyes and look around. Someone is lost. According to my compass, north is right through here. Now, I won't point him out, but one guy was pointing this way and he did a little cheerleading move. Everybody have a seat. The point is that this is the truth. That is north, that is the truth. And we live in a culture today where people think they can make up their own truth. You can't make up your own truth. There's a truth that's independent of you. And your feelings are often not true. Some of you went with your best feeling. You had no idea, and you launched off going south. If you want to go to Canada, this is the direction. You can get there this way, but it's the long way around. This is the truth. This is the truth. And to the extent that you are not lined up with your compass, you're what's known as lost. And you're going to bring pain to your life, and you're going to bring shortage to your life, and you're going to bring problems to your life. I know. I've lived that. So, how you feel really doesn't matter. And we have to remember that it's about choices. Personal finance is about 80% behavior. It's only about 20% head knowledge. That's why God chooses to work through money to change and transform us. For some of you, he's going to use this issue of money to heal your marriage. For some of you, he's going to use this issue of money to put discipline in your life in a place and in a way that you never dreamed you would see it. You're going to make different choices after having gone through this. It absolutely.
Okay, so gone through this is financial peace. The one thing that I really like about financial peace is it's not hard. It's not a buy these CDs and do weird things. It's all personal. It's all individual. And that was one of my favorite things when my wife and I were going through this. It wasn't we had to follow somebody else's ideas. we had to follow what God had in store. And there's tons and tons of biblical references throughout Financial Peace, and I really enjoyed that as well. Hearing multiple versions of different instructions from God on how to use our money. Briefly, the 7 baby steps with Financial Peace are saving $1,000 in an emergency fund, and then moving on to the debt snowball, then 3 to 6 months of savings account to pay all your necessities, investing 15% retirement, funding your children's college, paying off your home, and then living like no one else.
What does that mean?
So living like no one else, we'll kind of get there at the end, but he also references sometimes where it says give like no one else, and he'll talk a little bit right off the top, but donating, tithing to church is something that he always puts first in his budget. It's always number one, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But when you get to the end and you're debt free, there's lots of really cool things that you can do. One of my favorite stories in the book is there's a guy that used to dress up as Santa, and he'd walk around and he'd find people that looked like they were struggling. They might be walking down the mall or just random people, and he'd just start passing out 20s and $100 bills, just to surprise people. And he said the faces that he saw were just amazing. Things like that. There's a really cool story at the end that would be part of that as well. So budgeting, that to me is the number one thing. We've had lots of couple friends, and through teaching Financial Peace, there's people that have been like, I really don't want to do this whole thing. If there's one thing that we stress that they do, it's always budget. Even if you don't want to do any of the other things, knowing where your money goes is by far the number one thing. We've had friends that have come and tried to do this program with us, and they don't last very long, but they always say, we do continue to write a budget. We never knew what was in our checking account. We never balanced. We never did any of that. We always knew here was what was in there, and we had that much to spend. And now they do go through and do a formalized budget. There's a bunch of different things you can use for budgeting. We just do pen and paper, so there is a site. It's called the Credit Counseling Professionals, and if you just Google search budget sheets, there's tons of them that you can use. This is the one that we use. I don't know why I like it. It's worked for us, and it's what we've used for 7 years. There's tons of them. Some people do pen and paper. Our incomes don't fluctuate a lot, so it's fairly easy for us. We can just plug this into the computer and it calculates it all. And we can change our outflow as we need. Then throughout the month, we used to go through and write everything down in a spreadsheet, and I created the spreadsheet. So everything that we were planning to spend money on, from daycare to gas, to electric bills, cable bills, life insurance, house payments, utilities, charitable contributions, auto insurance, our retirement. We save for gifts. We spend a lot of money in December, and we figured that out over the years that we need to budget a lot throughout the year. It makes Christmas time way less stressful and a lot more fun. My wife has since said, I don't like that, it's too confusing. And so there's an app called Every Dollar. And it's a budgeting tool as well. You can go in and it's really awesome. You can put it on your phone, you can put it on your iPad, you can do it on the computer. And it saves it month to month. You can change your accounts to be a savings account, and it will carry over that money, or you can make it zero out every month. And so she's started using that. She's gotten way more involved with our budget since doing that. And that's what she really likes to use. So there's lots of different tools. Those are just a few that you can use. A budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. That's a John Maxwell quote. I really like it. At the end of the month, you always say, gosh, what did we spend our money on? And even now with our budget, we still say, man, where did it go? But we can go back and say, oh yeah, we had... our son needed tubes this month, those things. So this one's surprising. all throughout Financial Peace. So it's been revisited multiple times. This is something that Dave's done for a long time, and I've actually read all of the revisions, and they always say 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. I was like, man, can that really be true? So I did my own research, and sure enough, according to CNN Money, a poll done in December, 76% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
The other staggering statistic is the percentage of Americans who don't have $500 in the bank.
Mm-hmm. And I was just looking, I can't remember if I put that in there or not, but it was, I think it's over 80% of people could not pay for a $500 emergency bill. You know, and you think about that and you think, ugh, that's scary. And that's where, you know, this is not a cure-all for that. It's not going to make you gain more money, but at least you have an idea as to where it is going. So where to start with the budget? A zero budget every month. So what that means is you spend every dollar that you make prior to the month starting. If you have a surplus, you know, if you're anything like my wife and I, if there's extra money in your wallet, it seems to go away a lot faster than if it's already earmarked. So that's one of the big things that Dave says, spend all your money ahead of time. So, you know, I said we use this budget form. If we go through and at the end we have $37 left over, then we find a place at the beginning of that month to spend that $37. It might be saving towards a car. It might be, hey, we're kind of short in auto insurance. Let's throw it into that fund. But every month we spend every dollar before we make it. And then at the end of the month we don't have to question quite as much. Dave always says take care of your four walls first. The four walls are food, shelter, clothing, and transportation. And the great thing with budgeting, and like I said, the great thing with all of this is it's all individual. You know, nobody cares what you spend your money on but you. If you love to travel and you budget for travel, great. You know, if you want to save for your kids' education and you want to budget a whole bunch of extra money for college tuition, great. No one cares but you. It's all personalized, it's all individual. And that's one of my favorite things about doing this. It's not me telling you what you should do, it's me guiding you to get you to do what you should do. A specific budget can take a couple of months before it runs smoothly. If you've never ever done a budget and you put a budget together, you're going to say, holy cow, we were way behind in electric. Or, you know, we have way more out to eat money than what we need. Or grocery money was way short, those things. So it does take a couple months before you start to get that a little more leveled out. And it changes. Every month we go through and we get together just a couple minutes and say, okay, are we short anything? Well, we've really been spending a lot of money on groceries. Well, with 3 boys at home that eat about as much as we do, you know, our grocery bill keeps slowly increasing. So then we've got to figure out, okay, well, what can we cut out? Which typically comes from either clothing, which doesn't make my wife happy, or out to eat, which doesn't make me happy. So, irregular bills, so things like auto insurance that only comes every 6 months, or gas and electric that fluctuates a lot. I'm sure yours are similar to ours. Our gas bill in the summer is less than $20. Our gas bill in the winter is somewhere around $100. So what we do is we create little mini savings accounts either on paper or within that EveryDollar app. And so, you know, we might save $50 a month for gas. Well, in the summer, then we have a whole bunch of extra, and that just carries over. So in the winter, when we're still only budgeting $50 a month, it comes from that extra then. Okay, so we would be in the hole $50, but from the summer, we've saved up a little bit. Yeah.
The budget billing that the utilities have really makes sense. Like,
Yep,
that gets you
you're
really
right.
close.
Yep, and that's definitely an option too. Accounts can contain a surplus, just like I said. If you know, with your auto insurance, like we pay ours every 6 months, it's a fairly large sum, and we just budget. We divide that sum up into 6 months, and we pay ourselves that money. And when it gets to the auto insurance, it's not nearly as big of a hit to write that check. You know, it's no big deal. 57% of divorces stated that their number one fight was money. And this doesn't cure it all. You know, we still argue a little bit, oh, well, I'd really like a new dress or some new shoes or something. And I say, well, I'd really like a new golf club. So, you know, there's arguments there, but it's not arguing like, we don't have money to pay this. It's arguing what do we want.
Or whose fault was it that we
Right, right. So not a lot of blame when you have a purpose for your money. Irregular incomes, these get a little bit tricky if you're commission-based income. To do a budget, you prioritize the most important things first. So, you know, typically you aren't going to only be able to pay one, but that's how you set it up. If you say, okay, if I can only pay one bill this month, what am I going to pay? If I can pay 2 bills, what am I going to pay? If I can pay 3 bills, what am I going to pay? And you go down the list until everything is paid for. And some months you may be able to go out to eat, and some months you may not be able to go out to eat. Save for low priority items during high income months. So if your average budget is $10,000 and you make $11,000, then you have extra money to play around with. And you can put surpluses into certain accounts like we talked about with the other budget. The debt snowball, this was one of the biggest tools for us. We have never had any credit card debt. That's just not what my wife and I have ever done. But when we first got married, we had student loans, 2 car payments, 2 sets of student loans, and I think that might have been about it. So with the debt snowball, it's kind of backwards thinking. You know, if you ask anyone else, they say, oh, pay your highest interest rate first. But the debt snowball says pay your lowest debt first. Mm-hmm. So if you have $200 on a credit card and you have $2,000 on a truck payment and $10,000 on a student loan, you would start with that credit card payment, even if your student loans is a higher rate. And the reason for that is because it really starts to become kind of a game, and you can see winning a lot faster. You know, you can knock out those little debts really fast. And what you do then is you take all your extra money and you throw it into those debts. So if your average payment for your $200 credit card was $20 and you have $40 extra, then you pay $60 a month until that's gone. And then you take that $60 a month and pay it towards your truck. And now your truck payment that used to be.
You also take that 60, but you also have the amount you're not paying for the debt you paid off.
Right.
That's
right.
what causes the
So when we were paying ours, and again, this is not set in stone. We fluctuated a little bit. My student loans and my truck payment and my wife's student loans were very close. My truck was a little bit less. And my wife says, no, we're not paying the truck first, we're paying off my student loans. And so it wasn't worth the fight, and so that's what we did. And by the end, the truck was the last thing we were paying, and we were writing almost 5 times our monthly payment towards our truck. And it goes away so much faster, and it's so much more fun to see those things happen. So it really did work. We didn't increase our income at all, and we ended up paying off, I think, about $75,000 in about 3 years. So it was a great feeling, and now we spend it all in daycare, but that's a whole nother speech. So prioritizing your debts, it is hard. If your credit card is 20% interest and it's way down the list, it's hard for people to accept that, but it really is. Seeing those little victories of things going away is so much better than trying to pay off the highest interest first. Dave talks a lot about getting gazelle intense, and that's actually from the book, from the Bible. Proverbs 6:4-5 says, "Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler." So it's written right in there to get away from debt as much as you can. Proverbs 22:7, "The borrower is servant to the lender." And that's something that we just made a decision that we did not want to be a part of. So then through the process of that, when we were done with all of our debt, then we decided, well, we need a new vehicle. So I'm a big visual person, so what I did was I made a goal sheet for us, and I just started with, I think the bottom is 500, and I went up by 500 increments, and we highlighted and filled in what we were saving, and when we got to the top, we went and wrote a check for our van. So, any sort of visuals you can do definitely help. Does God need my money? This was something that when we were going through our debt process, we didn't necessarily do it right. Giving was important, and we still gave to the church, but getting out of debt was our most important. And now that we're out of debt and we're reading more about stewardship and giving and offerings and those things, it was really eye-opening to make that connection that God doesn't need anything from us. He's the ultimate giver. He doesn't need you to give to the church. The reason for him to ask you to give to the church is he wants you to be like him. He wants you to be that giver. And we were created in his image, and he wants us to be givers as well. We're happiest when we are giving. Another Zig Ziglar quote, show me your calendar and your checkbook, and I'll tell you what's important in your life. So I want you to think back and think to your checkbook or your debit card or whatever, and think, what's probably my top 5 expenditures? And where do those rate in terms of my priorities? And that's something that really, when my wife and I look at that and we think, oh, we spend a lot of money in places we probably shouldn't, and places that could be spent somewhere else. And to this day, we still have those conversations, but it is something that's important to look at and important to think about. Become a cheerful giver. So many times when talking with people on the stewardship committee, we used to call people that weren't donating to church or weren't giving or weren't meeting their pledges when we were trying to pay off of our church. And that was one thing, I love talking about money, and if people come up and ask, I would gladly assist them. But calling people and asking them why they aren't giving their money was something that I wasn't real comfortable with. But it was, again, something where people were like, oh, we just haven't had time. Oh, we just haven't. And God says he wants you to become a cheerful giver. Giving should be something that is fun. A tithe was originally when a church would impose a 10% tax. It used to not be voluntary. If you went to church, you had to pay 10%. And it's in the Old Testament a lot. Tithing is in the Old Testament a lot. It's not a lot in the New Testament. Genesis 28:22 says, and the stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all of that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. 2 Corinthians 9:7, so let each one of us give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or not of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And that to me is most important. I'll get to the slide here in a little bit, but the average Christian gives 3% of his income to the church. Okay? So that's less than a tithe, yes. But God doesn't want you, this isn't meant to be painful. It should be inspiring, and it should be faith-forming when we give. What do we give? God calls for our first fruits. And that was something I was like, gosh, first fruits, what does that mean? Well, in the old days, we lived a lot different than we live today. And the first fruits were every one of your harvests, you gave the first fruits to the church. And the church would make sure that everyone was fed. And that's where that comes from. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with your first fruits. And we made ordinance to bring the first fruits to the ground, and the first fruits of the fruit of all trees year by year to the house of the Lord. And that's the important thing. You're going to see something here in a little bit, but Dave talks about always giving as your very first priority. So when you're doing your budget, if you're worried about paying off your debt, giving should be your number one priority. And Romans 11:16 says, for if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. If we're taking our money and we're doing things the way that God wants us to do with them, he's going to take care of us. It may not always be the way that we want it to be, okay? But it's going to be the way that he wants it to be. And actually, I walked in here and I looked up there and saw it says faith. And it says it doesn't make things easy, it makes them possible. And I thought, what a great thing to have up there. And that's a lot here too. You know, if you're willing to give, regardless of your situation, and it's your first priority and it's your number one priority, then God's going to take care of you.
I would even add to that, I guess my concept of what you're saying involves tithes, offerings, and alms, and it's actually part of your worship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, money is just, they're numbers on a page, on a spreadsheet, they don't live, they don't have any life, they don't do anything except manage circumstances. But when you go to church and you offer a portion, whatever God puts in your heart, in the most elemental sense, that's worship.
Mm-hmm.
And if your worship's true and your heart's right where you place that offering on the altar, it's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't otherwise.
Right. Okay, so this is, I thought the conversations in this were pretty good.
Tom's with us in Sacramento, California. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Better than I deserve, sir. How can I help?
I was calling about tithing. We just finished up FPU in week 9 to talk about tithing. I'm all in for it, but my wife struggles with it, and because it put us behind on some of our bills. I was asking you what you thought about it, and
Let me see if this helps. Nope.
Financial Peace University at your
Yes.
local church.
yes, we did.
Better.
You all attend that church?
Yes, Bayside.
And so you're Christians?
Yeah.
Oh, Bayside.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good folks.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'm going to give you a smart aleck answer first, and that is what your wife thinks about this, what you think about it, and what I think about it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
As believers, what we should be concerned about is what God thinks about it.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
And so that's thing one. Thing two then is if God is telling us to give 1/10 of our income, according to Scripture, He is, off the top before we do anything else to our local church, why would He have us to do that?
To trust in the Lord.
Well, to trust in Him, that's good. But also because He's trying to change us into givers.
Uh-huh.
He wants to activate that part of our heart that is most like Him, and that is the generous, giving, graceful part of our heart. And by the way, He says, He's in essence is saying, a loving father is looking at you, looking at me, looking at your wife, and saying, hey kiddos, the best way to live your life is be generous. And so I'm telling you to start before you do anything, being generous. It changes you, and you're going to have a better life because of that. And so you're trusting Him that He is advising you something not for your harm, but that is for your good.
Yes.
And so, in a sense, to say otherwise is a lack of trust. Now, we all face that. We all face those questions. And when you look at the budget and say we don't have any money, and if I tithe, then something's not going to get paid, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. You know what? I'll tell you, having done budgets for 25 years, I also think if you're doing a written budget, that's probably not true.
Okay.
Because most people that can make it on 90% or can make it on 100% can make it on 90%. Now, if you're way upside down and you already aren't able to pay all your bills, tithing would just add to that.
Yeah.
But if you're able to pay your bills today and tithing keeps you from paying your bills, there's something else wrong going on in your life and in your budget.
So the remaining conversations are pretty good, but I'm going to run out of time if I don't pause that there. But the biggest thing was he talked about, it's not for our salvation. You're not giving to get something back. Okay, we're giving to change us. And that's the big thing. He talks a little bit about how it's not ours to begin with. And I would agree with the 90%. We look at our budget, and my wife even says that sometimes. She's like, gosh, we work so hard, and where does our money go? Well, we put a decent amount of money into things that we never see. Daycare, retirement, and eventually we will, and those are all important. But there are typically things that you can cut back on a little here and there to make tithing still an option. So what is the correct amount to give? that's the elephant in the room where I tell you you have to give a certain amount of money, and I'm just kidding.
Well, that's happened.
I know, it has.
In
And that's the
40
part
years,
that...
I know plenty of people personally who left the church because a priest said that to them.
Yeah. And that's the tricky thing, and that's the part where, reading some of John Maxwell and some of those other, Dave and some of those, yes, 10% is great, but if you can't give 10%, don't just give none. If you can give 1%, if you can give 2%, if you can give 3%, all of that, that's my 10-minute warning. All of that is still very important, and it really is between you and God. If you're struggling, if you don't think you can make it, then maybe your tithe is a little less. If you're starting to turn things around and you're really working, then maybe it's offered as a thanksgiving. There is no fancy formula. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really between what you and your family and God decide. Again, we kind of talked about that. According to the National Center for Charitable Statistics, Christians give about 3% of their income. And part of, as I was trying to prepare this, I was going through, and there's another really awesome, so Dave is starting to get a little bit older, as you can see, and he's starting to branch off, and he wants his legacy to continue. And one of them is a really young guy, and his name is Chris Brown, and he does, along with Dave, Chris Brown's Stewardship Hour. And you can listen to all of his half-hour segments online. They're all free. It's a podcast. And he was talking about the 3% of your income and what you should give. And he was really hammering home too, yes, we'd love to have it 10%, but if you can't, don't make, the church shouldn't pressure you into it. And he said, if they do, you have one of two options. Find a new church, or it could be that God is calling you to get involved with the church to help them realize that, they're being pushy, or it needs to be spent wisely so people aren't offended, or those things. And I thought, ooh, what a powerful message to say, don't just give and don't run away. Maybe this is God's calling for you to take action and to help. Time, talent, and treasure. So on stewardship, when I was on the stewardship committee, this was a big thing for us, the time and talent packets. There are lots of options to give. We're at a point in our lives where we have increased our monetary giving a little bit because time is something that we are struggling with. 3 boys at home, both working 2 jobs, it's hard, and we would love to be more involved, but we feel like, God is giving us the treasure to give, and time is not something we're capable of doing right now. And you may be the exact opposite. Money might be tight, but you have time. And the church is always in need. I'm assuming all churches are like St. and they're always needing somebody to bring in food for celebrations or services, mow the grass, snow removal, cleaning the bathrooms, restocking things, general maintenance, all of that stuff. There is a large amount of opportunities that you can donate your time. Talent, you can be a reader, you can be a greeter, you can be a Eucharistic minister. There are so many different ways that you can volunteer your time, talent, or treasure, that money is not the only thing that should be the focus. This one's really cool, and I wanted to show you this. This would be part of that living like no one else.
You know how sometimes it feels like life just happens? Just random things seem to fill your day. Things with little or no consequence to anyone else. I know God's in control of my life, but I never really saw how much He was weaving my story with other people's stories, and really into His story. Well, that's all changed. It was a cold day, the kind where you really don't want to have some long conversation outside with someone, especially with someone you don't really know. But that's exactly what God had in mind. Amy and I had just eaten lunch at Duplin's downtown Franklin, and we were walking to the car and we see this couple that I thought I recognized from church. It would have been awkward just to walk by them and not say anything, so we stopped and said hey and did the whole, yeah, you guys go to fellowship thing, whatever. Well, we start talking and the whole Dave Ramsey thing comes up. They asked us where we were in the process, and I told them that so far we paid off $60,000, but still had $10,000 left to go. They asked us what we would do when we were debt-free. I laughed and told them, well, I told my kids I'd buy them a trampoline, but we really wanted to adopt, and we committed to being debt-free before we did. The whole conversation only lasted about 3 minutes. It was like, nice to meet you. That was random. Well, the next day, that random person shows up at my office with this brand new trampoline. I couldn't believe it. It was like my kids are gonna freak. I set it up that night, and my kids jumped on that thing for 4 hours. I mean, we didn't even know these people. They didn't have to do that. I mean, really, that's pretty generous. Well, the next day, I get an email from the same lady saying, oh, you guys seem like a sharp couple, and we'd love to come by and talk to you about something. I emailed her back and said, that sounds like a multi-level marketing proposal. And if it was, we really weren't interested. Of course, she says it's not that sort of deal, but she was really persistent. She even called Amy. Amy had been sick, and it really wasn't a great time to have company over. Our house is a wreck, and we didn't feel like picking it up. We said everything short of, please don't come over to my house. So they show up, and I'm like, here we go. Let's get this over with. Don't say yes to anything. I couldn't believe they sunk their claws into us with that trampoline to get us involved in some pyramid scheme. Anyway, so we small talked for about 5 minutes, and then right when I thought they were about to drop the bomb, they did. But it wasn't the bomb I was expecting. So the lady says, well, we told you we'd only be a few minutes, and I really don't know how to say this, but we want to pay off your $10,000 left in debt so you guys can adopt. She pulls out her checkbook and goes, how do you spell your guys' names? What? Are you kidding me? Are you for real? I mean, who does that? Who writes somebody a check for $10,000 and gives it to people they don't even know? So they give us a check and they said, just don't act weird around us at church and just don't tell anybody it was us. And they drove off. I mean, Amy and I stood there for 10 minutes in total shock. And we cried, and we screamed, and we ran all over the yard and the house. Unbelievable. I mean, seriously, it was beyond belief. We realized 9 months later when we brought Malaya home, the check they wrote us was dated 9 months prior to Malaya's due date. They gave us that money right about the time our daughter was conceived. It was like God was saying, I have a baby out there for you right now. I'm not waiting around another 2 years for you to pay off that debt. We felt called to adopt, but we simply couldn't afford to do it on our own. We found this random couple had already adopted 4 children and felt a calling to continue to serve through adoption. Rather than bringing more children into their home, they decided to help others adopt. It didn't just happen. It wasn't random at all. God knew his plan. He had just invited us to walk with him through this process. He was weaving our callings, our stories together for us to love and to care for each other, to make a beautiful tapestry for his glory. Thank you.
So, very powerful and fairly extreme case. But it doesn't have to even be that extreme. I remember we had a boy probably, 3 or 4 years ago, and he wore the same sweatshirt every day, and it was getting to be so ratty, and his family didn't have a lot of money, and he was not a very clean kid. And so I talked with the counselor, and I said, I'm going to buy him a sweatshirt, just throw it in his locker, and we don't have to tell him who it's from. It was right around Christmas, so I wrote on there from Santa and threw it in his locker. And he was just ecstatic. He had a new sweatshirt. He didn't have to wear the old grungy sweatshirt anymore. And it wasn't an expensive sweatshirt. Did $20 break me? Not at all. Did it make that kid's day? And for a long time, sure did. So there's lots of opportunities for us to give in different situations. Same thing, kid showed up for PE last year and never got to participate. All he had was his boots, and his boots were too small, and every time he ran, he got his feet hurt and got blisters. So an associate and I went, and I gave her $20, and I said, go buy some shoes from Target. So she did, and he came, and he was very thankful. He said, I love PE, wasn't able to do it, very appreciative. So, I'm not telling you these to make you think that I'm a better person. I'm just telling you because it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes little tiny things. If you ever listen to Life 101.9, it's a Christian radio station. I would highly recommend it. A lot of very good songs, but they do a thing called the drive-through difference, and you can go on and you can print a card, and you go through and you pay for the person behind you, and it works best if you do it at drive-throughs where there's not two windows, because then you can pay, and by the time they pull up, you're long gone. Okay, but you go through and you print this card out and you write down whatever message you want, and you pay for the people behind you and give the lady the card, and she gives it to the people as they go through. There's tons of fun things you can do. You can find lots of different GoFundMe pages. If you saw the news last night, Ashton Kutcher just donated a bunch of money to some Iowa schools to fulfill classroom needs that they need. And I don't know what you think of Ashton Kutcher, but those are all easy ways that you can give that isn't just giving away your money. Okay, I only have a couple more minutes here, but this I thought was really powerful, and it's not at all meant to guilt you into anything. When I read it, I felt like it was meaningful to me. It says, "You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. I will prevent pests from devouring your crops, and the vines in your fields will not drop their fruit before it's ripe, says the Lord Almighty. Then all nations will call you blessed, for yours will be a delightful land, says the Lord Almighty." So giving is not something that the church came up with. The church didn't say, "Ooh, this is a great way to get us to take their money." They're not the government. We know they're great at taking money. This is something that God has called you to do. He's called you to help others. He's called you to become a giver. And again, not because he needs your money. He doesn't need a thing. But because he wants you to become that cheerful giver that he is. The sheet that I gave you, we're not going to have time to go over it. But as I was looking at that, I thought, oh, what a great summary of some of the things with giving. So you can take this, tuck it in, you can read it, you can use it as kindling if you want, whatever you want to do with it. But one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted you to just set goals. And that's one thing through Financial Peace. Dave always says, if you don't write it down, you're not going to do it. So if you have a piece of paper, this is a personal thing. You don't have to do it. Don't do it for me. Do it for you. But I want you to think of some ways that you could change your giving over the next couple months. Okay? Or maybe it's just change your finance or change your whatever. So if you'll take the time to write it down, we're not going to share it, you're not going to show me anything, I just want you to jot down a couple notes. If you could change anything, what would you do? Volunteering at church, adding an extra offering here and there, donating some money to any of the local organizations that are hurting, Salvation Army, HACAP, any of that stuff. What can you do over the next couple months to change and to increase being a cheerful giver? And then that is all. Are you going to your next breakout?
I think there's a next breakout. I think you go to lunch. Or
Ooh.
they do that split thing.
Okay.
So Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Dave Ramsey phrase goes something like, live like no one else today, so that you can live like no one else in the future. And that is to live a life where we're not buying all the fancy things. We're making disciplined choices so that we don't have to worry about money so much when we're older.
Mm-hmm. And yep, you're right on. He says, live like no one else so you can live like no one else. And that's one of Dave's phrases, are beans and rice. He says, live on beans and rice. And that is cutting way, way back. You don't go out to eat, until you're debt free and until you can afford those things. I actually started broadening out. I love reading, but I'm a terrible fiction reader. I'm just not really a fan. So I've read a lot of The Millionaire Next Door, and then he wrote a sequel. I can't remember the author, Robert,
It's a Hawaiian name.
yeah, Kiyosaki or something like that.
Is it Kawasaki?
Something along those lines. And it was just amazing to me. It was a statistics book. I tried to get my wife to read it, and she looked at 2 pages and said, nope, not doing it. But it was amazing. What he did was he went through and surveyed millionaires. And not millionaires like you see, not athletes, not those, but people that have actually $1 million in assets and no debt. And it was amazing to hear some of the things. All of these people live like average Joes. 88% of them have never bought a brand new car. They all buy used cars because that's the greatest value. And it's weird to think, oh, millionaires, they're driving Porsches and Lamborghinis and BMWs. And true millionaires aren't necessarily like that. They start foundations. It was very eye-opening. I really enjoy reading those. If you're interested in Dave, one of the books that he just came out with, it's kind of a post-financial piece. So if you're like, I don't really need help getting out of debt or anything else, there's one called The Legacy Journey. And it is really, really good. It's kind of like the life after stupidity with money. So you're out of debt, now you get to do fun things. What should you do for retirement? What should you do for giving? And it's a pretty good book. And then there's lots of other ones. Total Money Makeover is one of his. The newest financial piece is called The Complete Guide to Money. This is, I think, the 4th revision. So, anyone else have any questions or anything? Awesome. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.